Let's get into it.
Ready.
We have a very special guest in the studio, Mr. Andrew Westacott, the CEO. Sorry, Mr. Andrew Westacott, the former CEO of the Australian Grand Prix Corporation since, what was it, 2011, wasn't it?
2011 I started. It was actually in about August 2010. I had the L plates on because Ron Walker, who was the chair at the time, made me acting CEO. And in February 2011, so I got MotoGP as an acting CEO.
Yep.
And then F1 in 2011, which I think we were first race of. They made me put in the hot seat. So I was in the hot seat from that 2011 event all the way through to last year.
Excellent.
It's a very long stint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd never thought someone, when we were talking about it the other day, and people bumped into it, the fantastic race, this year's event. People said, "How long were you there?" When I said 17 years of F1 events, because I was general manager of operations for about 4 years, and then CEO. It was sort of a long period of time. And you think back to the cars and the drivers who were there. Probably only one was Fernando Alonso.
Yeah.
Literally, You're part of the furniture.
I was. I felt like part of the furniture, actually saying good day to everyone yesterday and having a very good and fun time as a fan and having a look at the impressive things they've done. So it was lovely to go back.
Well,
Nice.
That's what I was going to ask you, what it was like going as a guest as opposed to running the show, because I've seen you run the show for so long and I know how hectic it has been for you. And I just remember days, be like Thursday night before Melbourne Grand Prix starts and you have a million text messages coming through, everyone asking you for tickets, whereas 10 years ago you couldn't give tickets away. How was it different now this year?
It was a completely different experience. Caught the tram in, came in technically gate 8 through the golf course, sort of fan zone, over the overpass, crossed the pontoon, over Champions Gateway, looked at what was happening down on Melbourne Walk, which was one of those wonderful creations that occurred on actually a plane trip between here and Singapore. It was conjured up, and so saw that, and just the way that's evolved, and then from the talk bar to what's now the location of a fantastic Red Bull energy station, and then up to the all the Rolex facilities and all those other things. I had a great day, but it was completely different, but very, very enjoyable. And the biggest thing I had to look after was making sure I watched the start of the race from the top of the pit building, and had a bit of the sponsor's product to drink.
Nice. You were definitely amongst it yesterday.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it was, and it was so cool. I mean, the way the crowds evolved, and they're friendly crowds, and just the euphoria in those grandstands when Max came to a sad demise, or a fiery demise, and a very smoking demise, was unbelievable.
Yeah, I've said so many times across this podcast that when we've done predictions for future races, I've said Max DNF.
Yeah.
And one time I don't.
So you got it right out.
Yeah.
Well, no, the one time I don't do it, I was like, nah, I'm going to play it safe. It's going to be a Max Ferrari McLaren podium.
Yeah, I think we got so sick of, we were like, please, Elle, we want a DNF, but we got so sick of just hopefully wishing that would happen, and it never happened, and it finally happened.
Yeah, it's always just funny as well, just seeing how every other driver has an issue with their car.
Yeah.
At least everyone has at least had one issue, and Max for the last 2 years has never had an issue.
That's right.
But for it to be in Australia, fantastic.
Oh,
Well,
great.
We got to
Witnessing
experience. I love Max, but it was nice to see.
Yeah.
He had 43 consecutive finishes in races.
Yeah.
So couple of years, and it was a much more exciting race than the two races that started the season. And I think I'd probably say, in support of how wonderfully Melbourne turned out, the crowd on Sunday was as big, I think, as cumulatively the crowds were at Jeddah and also Bahrain. As good as those events are, Melbourne's one for the crowds. There's no doubt about it.
Definitely. It's for the people, because there's just something for everyone. You see kids that are this big walking around. You see all kinds of people. I think people even go for the entertainment, not even necessarily just the F1.
Absolutely.
It's turned into such an event. Caters for everyone.
Yeah,
The food.
The food
is
was
so
awesome.
good.
Yeah,
I don't think people and the entertainment would overseas know what Moomba is, but it's a cross between the Royal Show and Moomba, and going to a rock concert and going to the footy and the G and everything like that. It is just all bundled up into one complete package. And people talk about the Drive to Survive effort, but I tell you what, the team at the Grand Prix, if you don't deliver on the promise, then people are going to come along and say they've had a crappy time, but it's every bit as good, if not better. So it was Melbourne shone again yesterday. It was nice.
Well, something
Very
like
proud.
452,000 record attendance or something like that, which is nuts.
That is many people.
So many people.
Big nuts, especially when you know that the 130,000 or thereabouts on race day could easily have been, 20,000 more. But
Yeah.
the good thing is you keep it at that right level, and now it's up to Travis and the whole team to make sure that you put in added amenities and facilities and stuff, and the viewing gets better and better because the quality of the facilities that Matt Walton and the guys in the infrastructure team put in is just so awesome.
You got to keep it safe.
Can you add more facilities? I feel like it's already a jam-packed event. I wouldn't know.
You make them 3 stories instead of 2.
Yeah.
There's always more room.
Yeah.
You can
Because
always add them in.
You bet. When there's a grandstand, you just make the rake a little bit steeper, and you put a few more rows on the back. So you can do it. I'm not saying it's easy, but when you're sitting from an armchair and I'm a fan, of course it must be easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, even I think we were saying when was it, on Thursday or Friday when we crossed the bridge, we were saying surely they can fit another bridge. They could do 2 bridges side by side or a double bridge. And even if going across from that Gate 8, Gate 9 area, which is along Queen's Road, and then, there's all the older cars that are kind of parked and there's that sort of kids area, there's still a lot of space there. Like there's definitely space for amenities. And like you were saying, you can definitely build the grandstands up high. You just need some good trusty engineering.
And then
You're good to go.
When you talk about overpasses, that's the sort of detail you then, in the world of commercialisation, you put new overpasses in. Formula One gets more track advertising. Everyone wins, but they're the sorts of details that the team now goes through. It's not about just the glamorous side of things, because if it hits the fan when it all goes wrong, you want to make sure that it's you've got everything sorted out. So it's behind the scenes stuff and the engineering design and the calculations to make sure it's safe.
Definitely.
But now the task, I know what they'll be doing right now. They'll be relaxing. They'll be catching up. They'll be refamiliarising themselves with everyone in the family and the family pet. And they'll be catching up on some good sleep over Easter.
Do
and then
exist.
The suckers for punishment, they'll be looking at what they can do for 2025, I can tell you.
Yeah, they're going to be catching up on some much needed sleep, I think.
So Melbourne Walk conception was on a plane from or to the Singapore Grand Prix. How did that evolve? Because Melbourne Walk this year was insane.
It was how it happened was that I've been looking. I'm a big one for stealing ideas from different events around the world and stuff like that. And the Oscars have been on. Clearly, they're always in about February and stuff like that. And you have the red carpet and you got the mix zone and people doing interviews, and none of that happened at Formula One. The Formula One drivers would get dropped right off where the paddock club or the paddock turnstiles are. They would wave to a couple of people who would just religiously stand there, and they'd walk 20 metres in through the turnstiles, never to be seen again.
Yeah.
So it's kind of just being able to bring the fans into the moment of the drivers walking in.
Yeah, but what we had to do, the challenge was, needed to make the drivers walk a little bit more. So I just
Do
conjured
they
up.
like that?
Because
Well,
they
they
don't do
didn't
enough.
have a choice, because I worked it through with Bernie and his offside, a guy called Pasquale, and said, you know what we should do? We'll create this thing. We're going to drop them off 150 metres down the road. And that hasn't changed to this day.
That's so
It's just
good.
got bigger and bigger and bigger. And they walk through the beautiful tree-lined gums. We called it Melbourne Walk, and that's remained since then. And we put it in front of Bernie and Pasquale at Singapore and said, how about this? And, they thought about it and they said, yep, that'll be okay. And but it's got bigger and bigger and bigger. And Formula One, obviously, and everyone can now commercialise it. And it's just a wonderful enhancement for the fans to see their heroes. And that's
people
come
are
out.
stealing it, aren't they,
Yeah.
as well? Other Grand Prix are stealing the idea.
Yeah.
So what year was it that Melbourne Walk first started?
2015, if memory serves me correctly. And
No, I think that's what I was thinking as
Yeah.
well, because I remember Lewis Hamilton not liking it. And he used to fly down on his scooter and try and get in the back way.
oh yeah, he did. And
Yeah.
Guess what? There is a second entrance to the paddock now that goes down towards the southern end where supercars used to be, but Formula 2, Formula 3. And that's a really important addition for ingress and egress until you get people like Lewis or Seb or Fernando every now and then who decides, I just don't want to come along and sign as many autographs or
Just
get as many photos, which is a little bit contradictory to their persona. But you know what? This year, from what I saw, every one of the drivers was on there and guess what? To their peril, if you're not on there, you're missing out on a big approach to your fans.
Yeah.
Oscar spent about a good hour, I reckon.
Do you know,
down
El,
there.
that's the funny thing, that first few years there was a little bit of pushback because the Formula One teams would say, but now what we have to do is we've got to factor 30 minutes into the driver's
changing their
program each morning,
schedules.
because otherwise the schedules were running late and they miss out on valuable time with the engineering team looking at telemetry and, you know, apexes and tyre selection and all that sort of thing.
It's actually funny though yesterday because you're saying that there's the 2 exits and we were watching everyone go out the same way. Obviously the people are leaving down the Melbourne walk, but most people have left the Grand Prix at that stage. But the only person that didn't leave that way was Max Verstappen. Remember, we saw him coming and then he went out the other way because I know he was not happy.
That's when I got my photo with Max, actually. Yeah.
Oh,
he was,
sad face, Max, or how was he? All
no,
right?
he was really happy.
on a
He was
smile.
walking
Well, he saw
with,
you, El.
Yeah, of course. That's 100% right. No, he was walking with his girlfriend, Kelly, and her kid. So, and they were all holding hands and they actually looked quite like a sweet family. And I asked for a quick photo and then I walked away and I thought, oh, he probably wasn't in a good mood, but he was like, oh, of course, and smiled. And I was like, oh. But he still went out the other way.
Trained professional.
Yeah, it's kind of like being an athlete. You have to be able to put the performance side of it to the side.
Yeah.
To
Makes me think he's grown up a bit.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I mean, last year I got yelled at by Carlos Sainz when I tried to do it at the end of the race. He said,
Well, Carlos, he would have been happy though.
oh, yeah, he seemed pretty happy
Happy
walking
boy.
around. Yeah. Million cameras on him. I mean, you take out an organ 2 weeks ago and then you win the race.
I was
bad.
speaking to someone yesterday and they were saying, have they just made him into this bionic man? Does everyone need to go get their appendix out now?
Did he actually have it removed? I know he got appendicitis, but they
Yeah. Yep.
Yep.
good effort, great effort.
Solid effort.
Amy has a theory on the appendicitis and the G-force.
G-force is just such a huge impact on their body, and then just for some reason,
Because
for Carlos, it was his appendix, and there's been so many other drivers that have also had appendicitis.
Well,
Yeah.
then now you're talking. If there's a precedent, Amy, I'll support your theory.
Yeah.
There
And
is.
there might be a benefit to getting your appendix removed.
Clearly,
Exhibit
yeah.
A.
Clearly.
16 days
You
later,
win.
15 days later, he wins.
Except you know what, he shouldn't have got it removed because then Oscar would have finished third. and
True.
I know, that
Would have,
was,
could have, should have. But anyway, it's
was
tell you what
disappointing.
a start to the season he's had compared to last year.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I think as well, imagine that first podium if it would have been in Melbourne, just how special it would have been.
Yeah.
would have been extremely special.
That was one of the you talked off air about some of the highlights and lowlights and stuff. One of the things that was pretty darn awful was when Daniel Ricciardo in 2014 second
Yeah.
silverware is up there. Some beautiful photos from John Toscano and everyone, and there's Daniel's beaming smile, and then later on that night, all over Red Rover.
Yeah.
All
Oh.
over.
that was
very
awful.
sad.
Now,
Disappointing.
you have worked with some of the greats, Bernie Ecclestone, Ron Walker, just to name 2 key figures, and many others. The good, the bad, the dirty stories. We want to know how your F1 career has been.
Well, I'll tell you what, there's a big mix because you've got the tall and the short of it there, but you've got then Chase Carey, who had the world's best moustache and a sensational person to take over Formula One from when Liberty acquired it in late 16, early 17, and now Stefano Domenicali and the beautiful Italian accent that and the comprehension he has of everything to do with Formula One. So it's nice to have been involved with all of them. There was a really funny story that Bernie was the deal maker. He always wanted to get what he wanted in everything, but he was loyal to a handshake. If he did the deal on a handshake, then he would honour the commitments of those. But he would also push the rules and push the limits. And what happened was that he was pushing all those limits. It was sort of agreed that Bernie was going to be the CEO when Liberty Media came along, and Bernie on day one in there with Chase Carey, and Chase says, "Well, no, change of plans, Bernie. I'm the chairman and CEO, and so you'll be the emeritus chairman." Bernie says, "Well, I don't know what emeritus chairman means, but I guess I'm not the CEO anymore." And Chase says, "No, you're not." And so Bernie had to philosophically sort of say, "Well, metaphorically, they bought the car, and so they want to drive it." So Bernie was also getting a bit of his own medicine, but he was sensational to work with. Ron was sensational to work with. The deals and the extensions we did were really, really good. There was one I can remember And Ron and I would always say, you know, if it comes down to wire, don't blink. And we were in the motorhome, Bernie's motorhome in the paddock in Catalonia in about 2014 doing a contract extension, and we were outnumbered 3-2. They had Donald McKenzie, who was the boss of CVC, Bernie and the chairman of CVC, who was a guy called Peter Brabeck, who at the time was also chairman of Nestle. So pretty sort of big businessman. And then Ron and I were in there, but we got a contract extension on the right terms and worked out pretty well. But they were always great people to work with, as were the guys at Dorna, Carmelo Espeleta and MotoGP contract extension. So had a ball working with them. Some funny stories with Ron, though. He was great.
Any that you can share with us?
Well, there was a wonderful one. I'm glad you asked, Elle. There was a wonderful one when he went over to Adelaide. We just pinched the event from South Australians, and you've got to take your hat off to how pioneering they were, because in 1985 there weren't other Formula One events in Asia, and they were the first one. So when we came along in 1996, there was another event in Japan, but you know, Formula One was pioneering in Adelaide. And so Ron, they were a bit complacent, sleep at the switch, and Ron and Jeff Kennett, with, you know, the major events company being sort of created by Joan Kerner back in the day, they came along and said, all right, well, we're going to pinch the event.
Sorry, Adelaide.
Ron loved the bravado of everything and his presence. He was over in Adelaide one day, and this guy looks at him and says, "You're Ron Walker, aren't you?" He said, "Yes, I am." He gets a bit of spring into step, and the pocket square comes out, or the handkerchief comes out a little bit more, and he says, "You know, you're Ron Walker," and it was at a petrol station, and he was out there, and the guys were ready to fill the car, and he says to Ron, "And you're the one that's got the Grand Prix in Melbourne." And Ron said, yes, that's me. So that bloke at the Bowser says, "Well, fill the bloody car yourself." So that took Ron back. So he was you know, miffed, but he didn't often get miffed. He just set the bar very high, and he was a wonderful person to work for.
That's
awesome.
I mean, we're pretty happy that he worked that deal with
Oh
Jeff
my
to
gosh, so
take
happy.
it from Adelaide, bring it to Melbourne.
I mean, it'd be kind of fun to go to Adelaide.
Nah.
I just think,
no.
like, you know, I was just on the phone to my mum, and she was telling me about how she was watching the race, and I just think you see the image of the CBD in the background, Albert Park Lake, like St Kilda Beach. The pride that you feel for Melbourne, and I just think even for international viewers, I think like those aerial shots in comparison to, you know, we have some amazing aerial shots for other races on the calendar, but not being biased, but I genuinely think it's one of the most beautiful shots that we get. And even international listeners would be watching and thinking, I want to get there because look at that. Like, look at the event that they've
10
created.
times better.
Yeah. And also, thank you, Melbourne, for bringing us some incredible weather this weekend as well.
The weather was stunning.
It does shine, doesn't it?
Oh, so good. It just stunning.
Even the lake looked aqua blue. The
It
grasses
did.
are greener than you've ever seen before. The palm trees around Lakeside. The only thing we've done is making the track a bit quicker. The race time's a bit shorter than what it used to be in the old days. But it's a wonderful advertisement, and it's the right place to have the race just so close to the city. That's what brings the people into Melbourne. It's like having the Grand Slam in walking distance to the CBD.
Yeah.
You can walk or get on the tram and do the same thing for the Formula One event.
It's very accessible. Yeah. It's very accessible.
Do you think Sydney could ever steal the Grand Prix?
Well, they tried long and hard, and that was the thing. They
gonna keep trying.
They put the pitch down and said we're going to have it around the rocks and the harbour and stuff like that. But then they took the Formula One guys and girls who were doing their due diligence, put them in a car and took them out for 2 hours to Badgerys Creek, and I think they realised that Melbourne's a pretty good place to have it.
I think
Especially like Sydney and the Rocks, those they're not great streets.
No. Sydney's an incredible city, but at the best of times it's a logistical nightmare. So I think
Can you imagine them shutting down
those
streets as well? Oh my gosh.
No, it would just be
And
chaos.
you know, if it was in the rocks, it'd be all right. But if it was out in the middle of Badgerys Creek, it's pretty hard pressed just to go out to Homebush and stuff these days.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I think Melbourne's sports fans, and you look what we've had at the start of 2024 with Taylor Swift and Formula One and the tennis. You girls would have got the trifecta, wouldn't you?
We put on a great event here, that's for
You go,
sure.
"Oh."
We've got everything.
Yeah.
Put on a great event.
All right. So, big question for you, Andrew. Hanoi Grand Prix. I understand that you were part of a team possibly looking at that. And Hanoi, obviously, as we know, never came to fruition. What can you tell us about it?
Yeah, for those people who don't know, one of the things, I mean, Melbourne's always been synonymous with having fantastic people who work in events. The talent gets exported and it should be a monetarised talent. You know, the events industry and the capability is something that you should sell just as much as tickets or grandstand seats or infrastructure. And what happened was that, you know, Melbourne and Victoria does a lot with the Vietnam and particularly Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City with, for instance, RMIT University being up there. And so what happens is that they had a visiting delegation, came down to Australia and said, what can we do to put Hanoi on the map? And we said, give them a Formula One Grand Prix. So the Australian Grand Prix Corporation provided consulting services along with a number of other people who were in our team. And we did that from about 2016 it started to 2019. They got an event. They started building the circuit. They had the circuit ready to go.
It was a street race, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a street race in the Mee Din district near the National Stadium. There was lots of iterations, but essentially we were the consultants that helped and showed Formula One what Hanoi could do, and had also on the reverse told the people in Vietnam and Hanoi what they needed to do to deliver to the standards of Formula One. So unfortunately, when the Formula One Australian Grand Prix got cancelled on the 13th of March, a couple of days later, Bahrain was cancelled. And I think it was about the 5th of April 2020 that the first ever Hanoi Vietnamese Grand Prix was going to be held, and never happened. And then there were some political upheavals and other things. So they never got back onto the program, which was a real pity because it would have been a fantastic stimulus for Hanoi in the same way it was for Melbourne back in 1996. But yeah, great involvement, and went up with a lot of wonderful people to Hanoi and, pitched it, and we got it over the line, but it never got delivered. So
was that hard to see it not being delivered after you guys put so much time and effort into it?
Yeah, not as hard as seeing your own event. When you got up on the Friday, it was being like, I've never been jilted at the altar or anything like that. But that was awful. But it was pretty sad. It was pretty sad for every event because Formula One had to get 17 events away that year, and then they were doing those double headers, and with a lot of support from circuits like the Red Bull Ring, who hosted 2 events, and Sakir in Bahrain hosted 2 events, and Silverstone hosted 2 events, and so on, to make up for the gap where you couldn't have them. None of them had crowds. So there was a lot of devastation everywhere, and we were part of that devastation. But Singapore was, Japan was, everywhere outside Europe was.
Yeah. I just think for us though, it was just the timing, how everything was literally ready day before go time. And it just gets shut down.
I'll never forget being at Government House with you that Thursday night, and we were in the back entrance with the governor, and all of a sudden you and the F1 team disappeared.
We got these,
and
these
everyone
calls.
started being like,
what's
it's
happening?
cancelled.
Yeah.
It's cancelled. And it was the most eerie feeling because no one knew, but you guys obviously had to go discuss.
There was a lot of discussions that happened all through the night, because the other thing, from a public health point of view, there were 2 parallel sort of streams that were intersecting. One was because McLaren couldn't participate, and then the teams needed to look at that. But then we could have run the event, with supercars, Porsche Carrera Cup, and all the hospitality facilities and everything. But behind it was the chief health officer and the government officials and everything, looking at what was happening. That was just going, relatively speaking, through the roof compared to what happened at the MCG 5 days ago, or on the Sunday when the Women's T20 ICC Cricket World Cup had 85,000 people at the G.
And it's such a more compact area as well. It's not as open as what Upper Park area is. Yeah.
So it was, you're right, Elle, it was all happening on that Thursday night, the 12th, and then cancellations. Primarily the main reason and the only reason was because of the public health, but Formula One had to pull out because they, the teams and the FIA and Formula One, through many calls. So interesting, you talked about Hanoi before. Chase Carey, if you put in perspective how complex this was, Chase Carey, the president and chairman of Formula One, was on a plane from Hanoi to Ho Chi Minh City, then Ho Chi Minh to Melbourne. Jean Todt, the president of FIA, was in Paris. The legal teams of Formula One are in London. We're here at the circuit. The teams are at Crown Casino with people like Steve Nielsen, Michael Massey, Ross Brawn, working out this mishmash of political and contractual conundrums. All the teams are talking to headquarters in, Maranello and Spielberg and Milton Keynes and, throughout UK. And guess what? The media's all sniffing around. So a lot of people thought they knew the official position because they're getting tweets and stuff from the news services in Europe.
Yeah.
But it actually wasn't finalised until the following morning. But that was very, very hard work for the poor fans who were at the gates ready to come in.
I remember I was sitting in my hotel room just like waiting. I was like, okay, just the PR agencies were like, hold tight. We don't know what's going on. I'm like just sitting in my room like, guys, what am I doing? I'm waiting.
What's happening?
And then,
I was outside gate 1, ready. I was just like, I got the best park. I'm here. Because I was going to do some stuff with Robbie Williams and Miley Cyrus, who had flown in for the entertainment, which was probably some of the biggest entertainment that, the Aus GP was ever going to have.
Yeah, and it's stacked up
and then
there
it got
against...
cancelled. I got the message and I was like, fuck.
Do you know the one of the big ones? You talk about music and the way we sort of changed the event over the years. Kiss came along in 2008, and then it was the Who, and then Powderfinger and Simple Minds, and we had people like Tony Hawk on skateboards. The Celebrity Challenge was one of those ones that has disappeared, but that was an absolute sensation. That was one of the favourite times of the event from my perspective, and lots of other family entertainment. The Jets were there. The Grid Girls became Grid Kids. Things just got innovation and technology hubs happened. It was, and Grand Prix ambassadors were all part of the scene. So it's been a pretty spectacular and monumental event over many years.
If you could pick one like really funny story with you and a driver or you and something, what
Team
would
principal,
it be? Or something a bit juicy.
Well,
What can you give us?
Juicy that you're allowed to reveal.
Yeah.
One
Or
of
is
them
there
is
not a
that
lot you
there
can
was
do?
always this view that we'd pay a lot of money to all the celebrities that would come along, and invariably, Formula One attracts people because Formula One attracts people, and we as a corporation wouldn't be paying the attendees and the celebs to come along. Often they were there as part of an ambassadorial role, like John Travolta. He was a Qantas ambassador and flew out one of the Qantas planes from
I remember
from the US. And so one of the things he did for 20 minutes, he rehearsed how to wave a flag. The checkered flag, because he got to wave the checkered
Well,
flag.
I'm proud he rehearsed it, because we've seen a lot of people do it recently that cannot wave a flag for the life of them.
No, and so
Need some training.
John Travolta, the consummate professional, it was back in the day at CAMS rather than Motorsport Australia. The CAMS official flag waving race marshal came in, and we were in one of the meeting rooms in Pit Building 1, and he was teaching him the figure of 8, how to do it properly, and John Travolta was pretty proud of himself to nail it, because I think at the Korean Grand Prix, you might remember Gangnam Style, that bloke. Waved he waved it on the wrong lap.
Oh, God.
oh no.
That's so funny.
How
So
can
that
you
was
get
one.
that so wrong?
Did you see Jeremy Clarkson wave it the other day?
No,
it
it
in
didn't.
What was it? It
Bahrain?
was Bahrain.
It was
And
very
he
funny.
was clearly pissed as anything, and it's Jeremy Clarkson.
Yeah.
So he's like, it was really good.
But we were saying he gave it some gusto. Like,
Yeah.
unlike some of them, I just sort of hold it around and give
Have
it a
you ever
little
waved the
wave.
flag?
No, never waved the flag. I had to escort Arnie to the, where sadly Charlie Whiting used to do the race start before he passed away in 2019. But, the start-finish box, had to take John Travolta out there to make sure that he was able to do that. The other funny one was Arnold Schwarzenegger was in town one event, and all he needed to be paid was a plate of hamburgers, because the team in the Grand Prix suite had these beautiful mini hamburgers, and Arnie saw them and he just wanted a plate of mini hamburgers, so he did that. And then as a surprise, we got him out on the podium, and Lewis Hamilton won that year, and he looks around and says, "Hey, you're Arnie." And they both said, "I'll be back" at the end of it. So that was pretty cool.
That would have been
Has he
cool
been
to
back?
see.
He did the following year because for his weightlifting tournament, sort of muscle bodybuilding stuff, but it wasn't on the same week as the Grand Prix. So he did come back, but he didn't get to Melbourne's the Grand Prix.
Well, Arnie, if you're listening, we'd
Come
love to have you
back.
back.
Yes.
And I feel like he's a strong man. He'd be able to really wave that
Yeah.
flag.
He'd probably snap it.
Yeah.
If there's anything you could change from your time at the Aus GP, what would it be?
I saw how fantastic it was at the Australian Open when Ash Barty won the Australian Open, when people like Leighton Hewitt and Pat Rafter have done so well on the international stage. But it's always very, very difficult to win your home Grand Prix. It took Lewis a long, long period of time. We never saw an Aussie win in Melbourne. You know, let's see that Oscar can be that one. That would have been one thing that really, really would have capped it off. But in at odds with that, regardless of that, one of the fantastic things was just seeing the young grid boys and grid girls, the grid kids coming along. Oscar was a grid kid. Young Lewis Francis and Steph Madgman are young racers who are following their trade over to Europe and the US. I mean, they were grid kids. There's lots of them who are coming through the ranks. And there's one of the things that Ron loves is sort of memorials and statues and stuff like that. Now, what we did was we immortalised all the Australian world champions in bronze. So the 3 MotoGP world champions, Wayne Gardner, Casey Stoner and Mick Doohan, they're immortalised in bronze down at Phillip Island.
Yeah.
And Alan Jones and Sir Jack are immortalised in bronze at Albert Park overlooking the start-finish line. So I really want to see the third Aussie in my life be there, and I reckon there could be someone who's racing at the moment because he's a Formula 3 and Formula 2 world champion, so he can mix it with his peers, and I think that's a really good evidentiary base to say, Oscar's a pretty darn good driver.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, we've said here that we think he could be the potential next Max Verstappen. He has the same mindset, the same energy, the same kind of focus. It's just about getting a winning car.
It always is. And but, that means timing's everything. There's been plenty of great drivers who haven't got world champions or have got very, very close. And, McLaren's had great success in Melbourne with a number of different drivers and, engines and sponsors and so on. So, whether it's Miss McLaren or someone else in the future, he has got the talent, no doubt about it.
Definitely.
I was going to say, speaking of McLaren, did you see Lando has broken that record of most podiums without a win?
He has now.
Yeah, he has now got that title.
Well, if they'd let Oscar take that spot, then he wouldn't have won
exactly.
I've said a few times, always a bridesmaid, never a bride.
Yeah.
I love Lando, but then someone on Sunday after the race yelled at Lando.
Did you see that? And he turns on.
Yeah, and then they go, "Oi, Lando, when are you fucking going to win?" And Lando just turns around, he's like, rips up the middle finger. And it's now gone viral everywhere. Because it's obviously a sensitive topic.
Sensitive topic for Mr. Norris.
Well, at least he's got podiums. There's a few of those guys that
don't even have it.
don't have it. I think Nico Hulkenberg was one for a long, long period of time.
Yeah.
Wasn't it?
Yuki. Who else? Zhou, Guan Yu. There's so many of them that no podiums.
And final question. Daniel Ricciardo, do you think that was the last time we see him race in Melbourne?
It's going to be an interesting one because Daniel's a great driver. Get him in the right car and he'll do all right. But he's not performing terribly well against Yuki. He's been three zip down. Yeah. And so you've got to be beating your – first thing you've got to do in any team environment is you've got to be beating your teammate. That's a great indicator. But he does know his stuff and it's a long season. We're, 3 races into 24. Yeah. I'm going to back him that he's going to be there next year because I love the guy and I want to see 2 Aussies, if not 3 Aussies, because Jack Doohan might be the one who was a driver at Alpine. Get him up there. So let's say, no, it's not the last time we're going to see Daniel Ricciardo at Melbourne.
You heard it here first. Well, thank you so much for coming in today, Andrew.
Thank you.
I've loved it. It's been fantastic.
Really,
We'd love to get you on again.
We could easily keep
We would
talking.
love to squeeze more stories out of you. We want to hear it all.
Well, if the ratings go up, we'll get some more stories for
definitely.
Part B.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, I have heard some before, so I want to squeeze them out next time.
I'm sure the listeners will come back and say, hey, we want to know about this or we want to know about this, and we can collate the questions and then
all those conversations that happen on those plane rides around the world.
Too right.
All right. Thanks so much,
you so
Andrew.
much,
Thank you.
Enjoy.
Pleasure. Thanks much.